Today, we're going to do something, well, a little bit different to unpack a truly profound historical moment. I'm actually going to be stepping directly into the worn out sandals of Peter. We're going to recount that gritty, exhaustion-filled morning that literally changed the trajectory of human history. We're going to look at this totally familiar story from the inside out. You're going to feel the sand, the deep, bone-tired exhaustion, and the absolute awe of a miraculous catch. Okay, so let's dive right in. Picture me standing there on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. I am absolutely exhausted after a completely wasted night of professional fishing. And you've got to remember, this wasn't just some bad hobby outing, right? This was my livelihood. We had tried the shallow spots, the deep channels, literally everywhere. My hands were completely raw, my muscles were aching, and honestly, my pride as a professional fisherman was just entirely deflated. So, part one, a night of empty nets. The incredibly mundane reality of a failed catch. I'm just kneeling there in the shallow water, doing that tedious, totally unglamorous work of washing the nets out, just thinking about the sheer magnitude of our wasted toil. You know, the Greek word for that level of toil is kopieo. We aren't talking about a light evening row on the lake here. Kopieo means to labor to the point of utter exhaustion with strenuous, wearying effort. My crew and I had worked during the absolute optimal time, using the best professional skill we had, and it produced exactly 0 results. Which brings us to part 2, the teacher in my boat, an unexpected intrusion. Right in the middle of all this frustration, this massive crowd starts pressing in, and the Nazarene, Jesus, walks right up to the water's edge and just steps directly into my workspace, my boat. He looks at me and asks me to push out a little from the shore so he can teach without being totally crushed by this mob. I was so drained, but I did it. And as I sat there, exhausted in my own boat, listening to him, man, something shifted. The way he spoke about the kingdom, it made me completely forget my aching muscles and my failed night. Moving on to part 3, into the deep water, the absurd request. When he finally finishes teaching the crowds on the shore, he turns around and looks at me with eyes full of this strange anticipation. He actually tells me to put out into the deep water and let down the nets. You guys, the absolute absurdity of this command contrasted so wildly against my entire lifetime of professional experience. Think about my reality. Fishing is done at night in shallower waters, and we had already caught nothing. Now think about this carpenter's command, do it in the daytime, out in deep water, and try again. It made 0 professional sense. He wanted me to cast into Tabathos, the deep water. Daytime fishing in these deeper parts completely contradicted literally all established fishing practice on the Sea of Galilee. By asking me to go out to Tabathos in broad daylight, he was making it crystal clear that whatever happened next was going to have absolutely no natural professional explanation. I honestly almost laughed. I needed him to know I wasn't some amateur, so I told him point blank, look, we toiled all night and took nothing. I really wanted him to understand the facts. But then, I don't know, something unexplainable in his authority just stopped me. I suddenly found myself willing to look totally foolish in front of my business partners on the shore, and I agreed to drop the nets anyway. Now, even as I was protesting, notice my instinctive use of the word epistate. It means master, supervisor, or one set in authority. Even though I was supposed to be the expert on this boat, and he was just a carpenter, I was already yielding to his authority right in the middle of my own professional territory. And that yielding builds right into my next phrase, epitorematiso, at your word, which is so absolutely critical. Acting solely on his spoken command against my own personal experience captures the very essence of mature faith. It's acknowledging exactly what your experience says, but obeying what God says anyway, even when your own expertise screams that it's pointless. All right, part 4, sinking with abundance, the miraculous catch. So we row out to the deep water under the blazing hot sun, drop these heavy nets, and what happened next literally shattered every single natural law of fishing I had ever known in my life. The crucial point here is the sheer scale of the miracle. We went from exactly 0 fish after a whole night of intense human effort to filling not 1, but 2 entire boats. We actually had to frantically signal James and John to come help us. The boats were literally sinking under the staggering weight of divine provision. The net starts snapping and tearing, and the boats actually began to sink. The Greek word here is bythathaiste, meaning to be submerged. This blessing was so overwhelming it threatened to destroy the very vessels meant to hold it. It proved to me right then and there that God's provision routinely outruns our human capacity to contain it. Part 5, Encountering the Holy, a profound conviction. Suddenly, staring at the absolute greatest financial haul of my entire career, I wasn't thinking about the fish anymore, not even a little bit. I was looking at the man who could command creation itself. I just collapsed at his knees right there among the flopping fish and tangled nets. I cried out, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord," because in the presence of true blinding holiness, I suddenly saw exactly how messy, broken, and unworthy my life really was. I called myself a hamartolos anthropos, a sinful man. That intense instinct to flee, to tell him to get away from me because I felt so desperately short of God's mark, that isn't just a Peter thing. It is the consistent biblical reflex whenever an unholy person encounters genuine divine holiness. For the first time, you just see yourself clearly. But you know what? He didn't leave. He didn't agree that I was too messy. He just looked at me with those knowing, kind, piercing eyes and commanded my fear to stop. Me phobo, do not be afraid. In those few words, he proved that his grace was far, far greater than my sinfulness. Conviction was just the doorway, guys. It wasn't the room he wanted me to live in. Which brings us to part 6, leaving the nets behind, the ultimate vocational pivot. He didn't just forgive my mess. He reframed my entire life's purpose in a single instant, right there on the water. Just look at the massive transformation that took place. My old mission meant catching creatures only for them to die in an earthly business. But my new calling, it meant using those exact same skills to catch people so that they might live eternally. Jesus used a very specific word here, zogron. It literally means to take alive. He was telling me that all my patience, my teamwork, my ability to read conditions and persist through failure, none of it was wasted. It was simply preparation. My old vocation was becoming the vocabulary for my completely new kingdom mission. So we finally dragged ourselves to shore. We pulled our sinking boats up and we left everything. Literally everything. We left that record-breaking catch on the beach. We walked away from peak financial success and totally abandoned all our earthly security. Why? Because that massive blessing was just the preparation for the calling, not the destination itself. This all culminated in his ultimate invitation, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." He doesn't say, "Hey, go become qualified and then come find me." No, he asks for our commitment to follow first, and then he takes the personal responsibility to transform us into who we need to be. As I look back on that incredible morning and finally step out of Peter's story and into yours, I have to ask you directly, what represents security in your life right now? What are the nets you are holding on to so tightly, and are you willing to trust the master enough to leave them behind if he asks you to follow? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.